Shalom, good evening. This is TV7 Israel News broadcast to you from Jerusalem. Israel is working tirelessly to secure the release of additional hostages, while the United States hints at progress being made. The Islamic Republic of Iran is bracing itself for rising prospects of kinetic strikes against its nuclear infrastructure. The International Atomic Energy Agency warns that it cannot provide assurance that Iran's nuclear program is exclusively peaceful. On the 511th day of the war, there are still 59 hostages being held in Gaza, and as far as is known, 24 of them are still alive. Talks to extend the first stage of the hostage release deal so as to ensure that more hostages are released from Hamas captivity are ongoing. The mediators are reportedly optimistic that the talks will bear fruit, and an Israeli delegation has departed for Cairo, and another delegation might visit Qatar early next week. And while Jerusalem projects good faith, remaining determined to return all of the hostages from Hamas captivity, Israel's negotiations with the Islamist terror group is conducted in close cooperation with the Trump administration, which remains adamantly engaged.
I can tell you that this administration remains very much engaged. We know the deadline for the Phase 1 ceasefire is imminent. So Steve Witkoff, whom I mentioned earlier, and the President's administration and his team and the President himself remain very much engaged. We want to see the ceasefire continue, and the President has made it very clear he wants to see all of the hostages who have been held in captivity in Gaza returned home.
It is important to know that President Donald Trump's envoy to the Middle East, Steve Witkoff, during a Future Investment Initiative Institute event last week, highlighted that while the transition into Phase 2 of the deal is hard to materialize, good progress has been made.
The issue with Phase 2 is that there's supposed to be an end to the war as part of Phase 2. And I think the Israelis have a red line, which is you can't have Hamas in the government. And so it's hard to sort of square that circle. But we're making a lot of progress in the conversations, and hopefully it will lead to some good things, good results.
Witkoff, a billionaire who made his fortune as a real estate investor from New York City, further addressed President Trump's post-war Gaza plan, which he insisted was misconstrued.
In typical fashion, the president said some things, and again, it got misconstrued. The basic premise of what he was talking about in Gaza was that why should we try a solution that hasn't worked for the last 50 years? That makes no sense. And when I went to Gaza, and I think someone told me I was the first American official who went there in 22 years, it made no sense to me that you were there in charge of trying to formulate a development plan for Gaza, and you didn't see it. And when you see it and the utter devastation there, you realize that this is not something that can be completed in 5 years. The underlying May 27th accord that sets the parameters pursuant to which Phase 1, Phase 2, and Phase 3, the reconstruction happened, was based on a 5-year redevelopment plan for Gaza. It's not physically possible.
Meanwhile, President Donald Trump, during a joint press conference with visiting British Prime Minister Keir Starmer, addressed the future of the Gaza Strip, during the course of which he noted that nobody really knows how the highly sensitive situation is going to get resolved.
It's a rough situation, but I think we're going to make it much better, and I think that we've had a huge impact on that since we've been in just the 4 weeks. I think we've had a huge impact on Gaza, the Middle East, and we have some pretty good talks going on concerning lots of other people that are going to make it better. So we'll see what happens. Nobody really knows, but we'll see what happens. But I think we've had a very positive impact.
President Trump does not intend to give up on the Middle East, however, stressing that his administration will come up with some pretty good solutions.
So we're working very hard on the Middle East and Gaza and all of the problems, and it's been going on for years and years and centuries and centuries. It's a tough neighborhood, but it could be a very beautiful neighborhood, and I think we're going to come up with some pretty good solutions. But Phase 1 is almost complete. We've had some people that have been very seriously injured, very seriously hurt, both physically and mentally.
In other news, the Islamic Republic of Iran is evidently bracing itself for a potential strike by the United States and Israel, desperately deploying additional air defense systems around key nuclear and military installations. In parallel, knowing that its air defenses are essentially ineffective against the Israeli and American qualitatively superior militaries, the Islamic Republic has threatened to target Gulf nations if it faces any type of aggression. Earlier this week, during a meeting with Saudi Defense Minister Prince Khalid bin Salman Al Saud at the Pentagon, U.S. Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth was asked whether the United States would help defend Saudi Arabia against attacks by Iran and its proxies.
Mr. Secretary, will the U.S. help defend Saudi Arabia against attacks by Iran and its proxies?
Well, certainly that's a topic we're going to talk about today. Iran is a big concern in the region. Saudi Arabia has been a great partner, and that's something we're going to discuss today.
Riyadh's defense minister, for his part, also stressed the understanding in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia of the vital importance of working together with the United States to maintain regional stability.
It's a great pleasure to be among you today, and I look forward to continuing our joint effort to advance the long-standing relationship between the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia and the United States. As you mentioned, Mr. Secretary, we live in a turbulent region, and our relationship and our work together and cooperation is vital. It has always been vital, and it's even more important these days to continue to coordinate and work together to make sure the region is stable and the world is stable. And we are looking forward to having a very constructive discussion today to reach our mutual goals. And I'm pretty sure that with our strong relationship, we will achieve a lot together.
It is important to know that the United States is talking with additional countries in the region on this matter as it remains vigilant in the face of concrete Iranian threats. Separately, the head of the International Atomic Energy Agency, or IAEA, warned that time is running out for diplomacy to impose new restrictions on Iran's activities. In two separate reports on Iran's nuclear program, which were circulated among members of the Board of Governors of the IAEA, the agency's Director General Rafael Grossi stressed, quote, the significantly increased production and accumulation of high-enriched uranium by Iran, the only non-nuclear weapon state to produce such nuclear material, is of serious concern. Moreover, Grossi further highlighted that he is seriously concerned that the outstanding safeguards issues remain unresolved more than 2 years after the Board of Governors first decided it was essential and urgent in order to ensure verification of the non-diversion of nuclear material for Iran to clarify those outstanding safeguards issues. He continued by underscoring that these issues stem from Iran's obligations under the NPT Safeguards Agreement, and unless and until Iran resolves them, the agency will not be in a position to provide assurance that Iran's nuclear program is exclusively peaceful. While the condemning report on Iran's nuclear program raises prospects of a joint U.S.-Israel strike against related infrastructure, Tehran remains defiant against Washington's diplomatic overtures.
ما تحت فشار، تحت تهدید، تحت تحریم مذاکره نخواهیم کرد و لذا هیچ امکان مذاکره مستقیم بین ما و آمریکا در موضوع هسته‌ای تا زمانی که فشار حداکثری به این شکل خودش اعمال خواهد شد وجود نخواهد داشت.
Tehran's top diplomat, who made these remarks alongside his Russian counterpart, further highlighted the Islamic Republic's alignment with both Moscow and Beijing.
ما در موضوع هسته‌ای با همکاری و هماهنگی دوستان خودمون در روسیه و چین حرکت خواهیم کرد و مواضعمون رو هماهنگ خواهیم کرد.
Irrespective of Tehran's activities, President Donald Trump reaffirmed earlier this week once more that he would not allow Iran to attain nuclear weapons capabilities under his watch.
Mr. President, you've been very clear in saying that as long as you're president, Iran will never get a nuclear weapon.
That's true.
Thank you for watching TV7 Israel News. TV7 Israel is a non-profit ministry with all of our productions exclusively reliant on your generosity. Therefore, if you're blessed by the content of our programs, I would like to encourage you, support TV7 Israel with a donation. You can do so via our website at www.tv7israelnews.com. Separately, I'd like to also encourage you, as ever, pray for the peace of Jerusalem and salvation of Israel. I'm Jonathan Hessen wishing you a Shabbat Shalom u'Mevorach. And God willing, we will see you during our next update. Until then, Shalom from Jerusalem.